Imagine flying straight into battle, not in a tank, not in a truck, but in a helicopter. Soldiers dropping into the jungle within minutes, supported by gunships raining firepower from above. This wasn't science fiction, it was the US Army's bold new tactic in Vietnam. A tactic that changed the way modern wars were fought forever. Air mobility was a tactical doctrine developed by the United States Army during the 1960s. Its origins can be traced back to lessons learned during the Korean War from 1950 to 1953. During that conflict, helicopters had been employed primarily for reconnaissance, limited troop transport, supply drops, and crucially, medical evacuation of the wounded. Their ability to bypass rugged terrain and deliver supplies or rescue soldiers impressed U.S. military leaders. The Army began to envision a future in which helicopters could play a much larger, more aggressive role, not just in support, but as a direct tool of combat. This vision became known as air mobility, a doctrine that would change the very nature of modern warfare. For the first time, helicopters were not merely supporting forces, they were to be at the center of battle operations. At the heart of this transformation was General Hamilton H. Howe's, chairman of the Tactical Mobility Requirements Board in the early 1960s. Howe's was a visionary leader who recognized the helicopter's potential. His ideas were influenced both by the French experience in Algeria, where helicopters had been used successfully to counter insurgencies, and by his own time in Korea, where helicopters moved troops quickly across the battlefield. The first practical demonstration of his vision came in Operation Chopper, January 1962. In this mission, U.S. helicopters transported South Vietnamese ARVN paratroopers to strike against Viet Cong guerrillas near Saigon. The attack was a success, the Viet Cong were caught completely by surprise. For Howe and his team, this confirmed that helicopters could redefine how wars were fought. He believed that helicopters could replace trucks and armored vehicles in many roles. Given Vietnam's difficult terrain and poor roads, moving troops by air seemed not. Even before testing was finished, the U.S. Army decided to put the doctrine into action. In July 1965, the 1st Cavalry Division, Airmobile, was created, drawing much of its personnel and equipment from the experimental 11th Air Assault Division. This newly formed unit was immediately deployed to Vietnam, making it the first large-scale combat division organized specifically around helicopters. The typical air assault involved several types of helicopters working together in a carefully choreographed formation. Transport helicopters, Huey slicks, carried infantry soldiers to critical landing zones determined by reconnaissance helicopters. Each wave of slicks was escorted by 5 to 7 armed Hueys, and later by AH-1 Cobra gunships, which flew along the flanks to provide cover. Gunships were heavily armed with 7.62 mm machine guns, 2.75-inch rocket launchers, grenade launchers, and later, miniguns. Their job was to suppress enemy fire as the slicks landed. Each formation usually included at least one medevac Huey dedicated to evacuating casualties. Landing zones, LZs, were the most dangerous part of the operation. Slicks had to slow down and land, making them easy targets. To protect them, gunships swept over the landing zone at sharp angles, firing on suspected enemy positions and clearing the ground for infantry deployment. Once troops were disembarked, the slicks. Air mobility proved decisive in several major battles. Battle of Ia Drang, 1965. Hueys continuously ferried soldiers into combat zones, reinforcing American positions against massive Viet Cong and North Vietnamese attacks. Without helicopters, U.S. forces might not have held the line. Tet Offensive, 1968. During this nationwide assault by the Viet Cong and North Vietnamese, air mobility allowed U.S. forces to respond rapidly to multiple, simultaneous attacks across South Vietnam. Troops were deployed wherever they were needed most, while gunships provided close air support. On both occasions, helicopters gave the United States unmatched speed, flexibility, and surprise qualities that were impossible to achieve with traditional ground transport. Air mobility changed the way wars were fought. Helicopters became not just a means of transport, but a weapon of war in their own right. The UH-1 Huey became one of the most iconic symbols of the Vietnam War, embodying both the innovation and the tragedy of the conflict. Although the doctrine had its limits, particularly against large, well-equipped conventional armies, it proved nearly ideal for the counterinsurgency warfare in Vietnam. The tactics pioneered in the 1960s continue to influence modern military operations today, from Afghanistan to Iraq.